Okay, so here we go. This is week 3 for context. Week 3. Here's our quote of the day. Intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. Definitely an OT kind of quote. That's from Stephen Hawking. This is him floating around. Probably most of you are familiar with him. The late Stephen Hawking. Very disabled with ALS, but able to have a very functional life. Occupationally engaged, full life, I would say. We'll talk more about him as an example of what we're getting at in some of the stuff today. We talked about him already as an example of juncture, even though he's severely disabled. For the most part, I think he was in juncture with his meaningful work in teaching and research. But we're going to get at that in a second. Let's just kind of go back and kind of review some of that stuff we did in the lab to make sure we're all on the same page. See if you can answer these questions on your own. You should be able to answer them on your own. How can you facilitate nose over toes? Somebody is having a hard time coming forward. Stand up. I think we might have talked about that thing where you clasp your hands together and you do forward flexion repeated times with your trunk. To kind of see that in the lab, to kind of get that, it's hard to kind of talk you through that. Somebody's knees buckle during transfers. You want to have your leg outside their knee to kind of protect that. We're going to force the client to use their weak leg. If you want to force the client to use the weak leg, put their good leg further out and their bad leg further in when they're sitting. We'll force them to use that. Can't carry a plate of food with standard walker. They need a walker tray or a rollator. Commode is too narrow. You can move the wheels to the inside in some cases. Can't stand in high pants. Bar is usually good for that, some kind of bar. Can't open bathroom door. In a lot of cases, people just take the bathroom door off, put a curtain up there, do a reverse hinge on it, sliding door. Can't fit through the bathroom door with a walker. Again, taking the door off. Can't open the glass door. Glass doors can be very, very dangerous. People can crash through them, get cut. A lot of times, I would just help the person, or in some cases, do it myself. Take the glass door right off and put a curtain up. Always drops the soap, can't pick it up. Soap on a rope is a great one for that. Can't transfer in and out of bed. Think about different things you can add to a traditional bed. I mean, you can get a hospital bed, but a lot of times they don't qualify for that. There's bars that slide under existing hospital bed, like a side rail kind of thing. You could use a rope at the end of the bed that can pull themselves up, a counter, a nightside table to pull themselves up. Lecture questions. I'm not going to go through all those. Let me know if these are for today. Sorry. You need to answer all these, but in the lecture, we'll go through them if you have questions. Universal design. What is universal design? I think somebody already mentioned it in their homework 1, talking about universal design with a disability. It's the design of products and environments so that everybody can use it. It's used by all. Kind of that multiplier effect. The curb cut was a good example of that. Opens it up for everybody. You can all use it. And if it has aesthetically pleasing kind of component, that's even better. So it's kind of non-medical looking. This is a great one. She just taps it and the water goes. This is all wheelchair accessible, but doesn't look overly medical, I don't think. This is a cool one. These are kind of a steps and a ramp at the same time. So here's the ramp. If you're in a wheelchair, you're kind of going back and forth. And even the steps are pretty graded, so if you have difficulty with steps, you could use the steps. And over here, there's a railing, if you need a railing. So it hits all these aspects of universal design. I think it's probably even good for drainage. But it's a really good example of universal design for wheelchair and able-bodied folks can both use it. And to me, it's somewhat aesthetically pleasing as well. It's not all medical looking. 7 principles of universal design. You need to know all these principles. Equitable in use, fair and impartial, tolerance for error, flexible, requires low physical effort, simple and intuitive, perceptive information, meets diverse sensory abilities, size and space for approach and use. So a good chart kind of breaks it down. Equitable in use, design is useful and marketable to people with diverse abilities. Great example here. Shopping carts, a lot of folks who are quite disabled They can use they need like a rolling walker. They can use a shopping cart. There's also electric carts in stores. Flexibility in use. Design accommodations a wide range of individual preferences and abilities. The scissors. This is like a squeeze kind of scissors versus the complicated kind of scissors. You're just kind of squeezing. Hand flexion, if you have like arthritis and stuff, you can still use the scissors. Tolerance for error. Design minimizes hazards and adverse consequences of accidents or intended use. So it's safe if you make an error. It's not like all or nothing kind of principles. Low physical effort. Doesn't take much effort. Just using his wrist to open the door. Different kinds of door handle versus the grab and turn kind of thing. Simple and intuitive. Can't think of the name of the thing. It's not like somebody needs CPR. Those machines. I can't think of the name of them. But it's like that simple machine where you just hook them up to their chest with the chest pads and all that. It's a great example of simple and intuitive use. You just hook it up and it tells you what to do. Hit this, hit that, and it tells you, charge electricity, all that sort of stuff. It's very simple and intuitive. The more simple it is, it's kind of the KISS principle. Think about this with adaptive devices, and I saw this repeatedly. If it was simple, the person would use it. If it was in any way complicated, it usually was not used, no matter how great it was. Perceptible information. Design communicates necessary information effectively for the use regardless of ambient conditions of the use of sensory abilities. Braille is a good example of that. Size and approach. Adequate size and approach. Here's a good one for the wheelchair. It works for the chair along with a walking person, mobile person. I was just thinking, if we go back to our thing here, a lot of those qualities are in this. High tolerance for error, very equitable, low physical effort. See some of the other ones. Simple and intuitive. It hits a lot of those qualities, this design right here. Universal design in the classroom. This is a big thing for the classroom you'll have to deal with as a OT working in classrooms. Voice recognition software, sign language, personal frequency modulated transmission devices. This is what this is. So it's very subtle. I think she wears something around her neck, and he has this. It's not big and obvious, and he can hear what she's saying very clearly. If he's deaf impaired, wheelchair access. That seems like a simple thing, but even at Hudson, as you saw, the bathrooms are ideally as accessible as they should be. Braille. Universal design choices. Universal design for learning. There is a way of making learning universal design for learning. Multiple learning styles, abilities. Kind of try to do that with evidence-based teaching in this class. You're learning a lot by doing, learning a lot by watching videos, learning a lot by making things, listening to me, reading, experientials, practicums, experiencing it, different ways of learning. This is how your patients will learn different ways. Usually patients learn best by doing it versus talking, but different ways of doing it, sensory, that sort of thing. Reducing cognitive sensory barriers. Examples include multiple learning teaching methods, brain-based learning. Assistive technology definitions and assessment. Assistive technology defined, this is kind of defining AT, the application of practical industrial arts, i.e. technology, that helps people with a medical disability perform desired activities. Involves a device, it could be high-tech or low-tech, usually the low-tech, the better. Adaptation, redesign, instruction service. These splints, these pens, that's a great example of a low-tech, relatively low-tech AT device. Communication, mobility, computer access, adaptive toys, games, ADL, IADL, instructional aids, endless possibilities with adaptive devices. Some high-tech AT examples of that, the keyboards. You'll be working with keyboards with your kiddos in the schools. The standard keyboard has that configuration. There's different configurations of the letters for making more letters closer, less fatiguing, one-handed layouts, light touch, spacing on the keyboards, color, tactile tools, sizing, word prediction software. That's a big thing that's popular in the schools now. Moisture guards if there's drooling. Input devices, joysticks, trackballs, interface switches, looking, touching, eye gaze systems, speaking, mouse sticks, head movement, blinking. Hawking did a lot of that with just blinking. Computer access, all kinds of evolving tech access to computers. And this is something, again, you need to know well as a pediatric therapist. I know the assistive technology expert with the Bangor Schools, Carrie Luce, she's right up to date with a lot of this stuff. She needs to kind of know it by the back of her hand. She can think, oh, this might work or that might work for this particular patient. Different kinds of joysticks, the eye gaze technology, she's using his mouth. Skin put, this is like just tapping his wrist here. He gets different commands on his computer. Arm movements, different kind of mouse there. Even a newer thing is mind control. They're wiring up the brain so you can interface with the computer. Computer access resources. Don't need to know all these, but it's kind of FYI resources. I'm going to go through all these, but these are some good ones. It's kind of a source when you're out there practicing. The Iris Network, main division for the blind. Don't forget them. They're a tremendous resource for anybody with any kind of visual impairment, child or adult, and they're free. And they get a lot of tech they can get for your patients. Can't tell how many times I worked through the Iris Network, main division for the blind. They're easy to get a hold of. Great resource. High-tech mobile arm devices. This is a thing that a lot of therapists use in different settings with folks that have impaired use of their arm, a mobile arm device, usually for self-feeding. He's got one here. So the deal is with this, his arm is so weak or he has poor coordination, he can't get the food to his mouth. So this device kind of gives him assist, moving it up to his mouth. He's also got a universal cuff here. He's got a spoon. It's a hard time grasping the spoon. Both these devices to bring food to their mouth. This is a cool thing. This is done with a 3D printer. It's an exoskeleton. Gives her that proximal stability here in her core and her scapula, so she can do this distal mobility. And she's playing. Playing is like work for kiddos. It's huge, important. She's playing tea. She's pouring tea with this a version of a mobile arm device. This one over here, it's giving his arm assist so he can use the computer. She's using it to paint. I had a lady with MS, she used it to paint once. She loved it. It just gave her enough support and assist to do what she wanted to be able to do. A great example of high tech is Hawking thought-controlled wheelchairs. That's like a newer thing that's amazing. With him, the sensors were on his eyelids as he blinked. He picked it up with the sensor on his computer, so he could do computer commands and talk to the computer voice box. Universal remote, so he could work his environment in terms of turning lights off and on, adjusting the heat, locking doors, endless possibilities. A speech synthesizer, all these great things you can do with tech. Still really engage occupationally. This is kind of a profile of Hawking, and we're going to kind of apply it to these different models to kind of keep that fresh in your brain. This is kind of when he was, obviously before he passed away, before he came too disabled, but he was very disabled at this point. He still had a very engaging life. In my mind, I am free, he said, lived over 50 years with ALS, which is just astounding. There's a great movie on his life called A Theory for Everything. Him and his wife, true story, great movie, highly recommended. He communicated with twitching of cheek muscles and then later his eyelids, sensory receptors in his glasses, hits the letter on the keyboard, can type at this point 1 to 2 words a minute. Sophisticated word prediction software, I use the word prediction. 24-hour care. It takes money. That's the thing. If you're with ALS, as you become very disabled, if you have the money and the resources, you can still do great things, but it takes resources. It takes money. Like we were talking about, oh, that's a different class, I'm sorry. It just takes resources. So he was at juncture, I would say, for the most of his life, especially when he was teaching and speaking and researching through his computer. When he wasn't in juncture, I'm sure there was parts of his life when he wasn't in juncture. Issues around bowel movements, I'm sure, were not fun. Feeding, swallowing was not fun with him. He didn't want a G-tube in his stomach, so they had to physically push the food down his throat, because his throat, he could not swallow anymore. He lost control of that. So that he had aides that would push the food down his throat. So obviously, that was not a fun part of his life. Look at these different models. How do they apply to this Stephen Hawking, this fully disabled person? Through the medical model of disability, you would say Stephen Hawking is fully disabled because of his advancing ALS. Through the social model of disability, you would say Stephen Hawking is the only thing that's disabling Stephen Hawking is the lack of resources. If he has enough care at home, if he has enough technology, he can live an engaged and meaningful life like anybody else. So it's the technology and the resources that are disabling him, not the ALS. Juncture theory. He's not disabled or non-disabled. He's just like everybody else. We're all different. Abnormal is normal. There's a points through technology there. He can be through technology. Stephen Hawking can be in juncture with his life. Again, juncture is not about a disability or not. It's whether about you're fully engaged, have a good connection with your environment through whatever. Through technology, he is fully engaged in his environment for the most part, most of his days. A lot of times, though, he's not in juncture. If he was being through that swallowing thing, very painful, difficult kind of thing, I don't think he considered in juncture doing that particular activity. Applying the social model. The medical model, the body is a machine in need of fixing. Think eugenics, think modern medicine, think the bell curve mentality. Social model, disabled by environment. It's the ramp that's disabling. Lack of access is making you disabled. Juncture theory. Disability is not a category. It's Star Wars. We're all weird together. It's the normal. It's normal. Disability is normal. We all experience moments of disjuncture with the environment. For me, it's a cell phone. Maybe for you, it's your car breaking down. Learning how to ride a bike first time, whether you're disabled or not. It's not really dependent on whether you're disabled or not. Okay, let's stop this.